States, federally funded. We're very happy to be co-organizing this event with our partner at UIBS, with the support of the Georgia Department of Economic Development, the Metro Chamber, Next Generation Manufacturing, CONEX. And today we're going to be focusing on digital transformation, which is a topic that pervades the entire institution at Georgia Tech. We're focusing on the manufacturing component, and in order to do so, we have assembled two distinguished panels, each headed by a moderator who will do the introduction and explain to you who the speakers are. We are limited in time. The subject is complex. Suffice it to say that digitization is really side by side with globalization in terms of understanding international flows. Without further ado, I am going to turn it over to the first panel and to the moderator of the first panel, Alain Louchet, who is the founding managing director of the Georgia Tech Center for the Development and Application of the Internet of Things Technology, known as CDAIT. Alain, we are starting with the first panel, which runs from 1:30. We're now at 1:32, if I'm correct, running until 2:50. We'd like to stick to time in the interest of completing the program. Alain, the floor is yours. And again, welcome.
All right, thank you very much, John. And thank you for my fellow panel members to participate in this very interesting event. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Andrew Dugenske. It's a real pleasure for me to do that because he and I have been working together for quite some time. Andy is the director of the Factory Information System Center at Georgia Tech. But as importantly for what we are discussing today, he's leading the connection, if I may say, between the Internet of Things and manufacturing. As a matter of fact, I think now, Andy, for about 5 or 6 years, he's been organizing a symposium in the fall on IoT for manufacturing. The one for this year will be held, I guess, virtually this time on November the 11th. What's interesting about Andy for this particular discussion is that he's also a CEO of a software company that he created, Factory Right, that provides software for the manufacturing industry. So therefore, sometimes in academia, we love to stay at 30,000 feet, but Andy brings it back to reality and can make the connection between theory and practice. He works with students, but also he works daily with customers. So this panel will be looking into the building blocks of this digital transformation. And therefore, the panelists will be able to share their perspective and experience as far as how this is unfolding in their universe. So with this, Andy, I will leave it to you. It's about 1:36, so perhaps if you could stop around 1:50, 1:55, so that we can allow questions, I'm sure that we'll have following your talk. So.
Well, thank you very much, Ellen. I will be running through a brief presentation about some of the activities that we're doing at the Georgia Tech Manufacturing Institute. So let me share that with the participants right now. Okay. So logistically, I hope you'll be able to, please let me know if you can see my presentation in just a moment.
Yes, we can. I mean, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I hope it's not in slideshow mode. Is it in full screen?
No, it's in slideshow.
Here, slide.
Okay, let me change it.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Alain. Appreciate the introduction, and thanks to all the participants in the UIBS CIBER 2020 event. So a little bit of background about me. I am the director of the Factory Information Systems Center at the Georgia Tech Manufacturing Institute, where we work on company projects, enterprise manufacturing software systems, Internet of Things for manufacturing, roadmaps, standards, etc. As Alain said, I also am the CEO of a company, Factory Right, and we work with customers to implement manufacturing applications, custom software, and consulting. So why is the Internet of Things for manufacturing important? Well, my view is due to the plentiful, low cost, and powerful sensors, processors, and bandwidth that have been released over the past few years, data is becoming exponentially easier to collect, process, and store. And this has provided both opportunities and challenges for businesses. So Georgia Tech Manufacturing Institute is addressing these opportunities and challenges through a variety of ways. One is through consortia projects, targeted company projects, roadmaps, workshops. As Alain mentioned, we conduct an annual workshop, Internet of Things for Manufacturing at Georgia Tech, to receive the voice of, excuse me, of industry. There's very few people that present from Georgia Tech. The idea is to hear what industry has to say, and so that we can take that information and stir it into our research projects at Georgia Tech and provide value to our customers. We also conduct IoTFM manufacturing roundtables. We do presentations, papers, talks, and work with trade organizations and standards. So getting into the specifics, in the past, typical coupled factory architectures that have evolved through time are not suitable for future IoT factories. So here's a representation of a coupled factory architecture. And well, what's meant by a coupled factory architecture? Well, the idea is that if we look down here at equipment, and if equipment is talking to a particular application, there's a very specific line of connection between that piece of equipment and that application. If either one of those pieces or devices, either the application or the machinery changes, then this blue line needs to be changed. As the number of pieces of equipment and the applications increase, the complexity and the challenges associated with exchanging data on the factory floor becomes more and more complex. And so, whereas people may have developed simple systems to address specific activities in their factory, such as OEE or throughput, etc., those are good for a small niche operation or a small niche application, but trying to develop enterprise-wide implementations starts to fall down when the large amount of equipment and systems that are involved in a large enterprise are brought to bear. So as I talked about, as applications increase and equipment increase, the connections between applications and equipment start to increase exponentially, excuse me, becomes very difficult to maintain. And ultimately, it's challenging. So what are we doing in order to address this challenge? Well, we're recommending the use of something called a decoupled digital architecture for manufacturing. And the decoupled digital architecture makes use of a common message broker which exchanges messages among the entities, so that if something were to change on one of the entities, the way in which they interface to the rest of the enterprise, it doesn't affect the other entities in the enterprise. So as for instance, this machine tool here may speak something like OPC UA, and another machine tool may speak MT Connect, we've converted those protocols into a common protocol, namely JSON messages, which are exchanged using MQTT, through an MQTT broker. Then on the other side of where the messages are received, those messages are converted into the protocol that's used by the applications. So the applications don't have to change. The only thing that changes is the interface or the gateway. And we'll come back to this slide in the future. If you'd like to know more about this architecture, there's a link here, arch.phys.gatech.edu, which provides some additional information. And I'm happy to talk with the participants after the call, but since we just have 15 minutes, I want to just give a high-level overview. Okay. So what are some of the financial benefits of making use of a technology like this? Well, it's lower cost because it's a common solution versus a myriad of ad hoc implementations. We've worked with some customers, and they've stated that one customer said that they had 120 different OEE applications within their enterprise. So maintaining those they're very challenging. And then there's other types of applications, MES, ERP, SCADA, blockchain, etc. And if they all have different interfaces, and then you have different applications to accomplish those different activities, it becomes quite challenging versus having a common solution. There's fewer types and numbers of licenses. There's no proprietary lockout. I think this is very important because many manufacturers are being pressured by vendors to adopt their solution. Well, once the manufacturer adopts that solution, then the strategy of that vendor becomes the strategy of the manufacturer, and the tail kind of wags the dog. Expertise is readily available. Students and others are learning these technologies that are used in this architecture currently. Don't have to pay for $500 consultants. Rather, you can make use of people that have general computer integration skills. You can also make use of open source, commercial, or cloud offerings, and you can shop for the best cost and the best implementation for your particular situation. So what are some of the technical benefits of using an architecture like this? It accommodates a wide variety of devices, protocols, and application. It's built on standards, uses the most prevalent IoT technologies. It's very secure, scalable, maintainable, simple to use, traceable, and clear path for legacy equipment. I'll be talking a little bit more about what that means. So what are some of the accomplishments that we've been able to achieve with this architecture? Well, we've been continuing to develop, mature, and test this architecture with a variety of different partners. Some of those partners include Boeing, Delta Airlines, Ford, Ingersoll Rand, Moog, and Steelcase. And not only have we conducted proof of concepts at Georgia Tech, but we've also conducted tests and examples at the manufacturers themselves. So we're able to first develop the technology at Georgia Tech and then kind of roll it out to our partners for industrial testing and hardening, and we find out if there are issues that we overlooked at our proof of concept. Through our proof of concept, we've connected to various machine types, protocols, implementations, data structures, databases, etc. So we've handled many different types of things. And we've combined data that's being produced by both machine tools with IoT retrofit kit sensors that speak the same language as the machines in order to extend the language that the machines are speaking. So here's some examples of the decoupled digital architecture being used in factories. These boxes here next to these critical assets, There's wires you can probably see that go from the boxes to the assets. And these boxes will collect data from the assets over time and send them to the architecture. And then applications within the architecture will monitor these assets and determine whether there are idiosyncrasies or anomalies through time, and whether they need to be maintenance needs to be conducted on them, or something needs to be changed in a predictive manner. So the IoT retrofit kits look something similar to this. Here's an example of one on the left that has a box of electronics, has an RFID antenna and some other sensors. The second picture here is the retrofit kit that's connected to a hydraulic press, which stamps out steel parts, or an RFID kit and a sensor. All this data is sent up to the architecture. Here is another kit which is attached onto a critical asset, which is a piece of equipment, in monitoring the bearings in that motor and pump. This is an example of the retrofit kit attached to a 400-ton press. Now I'm gonna click on this movie, and it's fairly loud, so I don't know the levels at which everybody's listening to the Zoom meeting. So it's only 6 seconds long. I've turned down my volume. Let me try to turn it down so it doesn't blow you out. But I apologize if it comes across too loud. But the thing to look at is in the back here, you'll see the press operating up and down, and you'll see some of these lights flashing as the press operates. So let's try this. So there's the press, and you can see this light on the relay is flashing, and that information is then fed into this small single board computer, which is then sent up to the architecture. Oops, excuse me. So what are some of the examples of data, and what can we do with the data once it's passed through the architecture? Well, one example is equipment error Paretos, the number of errors that are produced by the machines, and they're Paretoed out so that manufacturers and engineers can look at the most pervasive challenges and go after them and optimize the factory operations so to increase productivity. Also throughput, cycle time of how the machines work. Honestly, if companies can just make you develop some throughput graphs for their factories, that will tell a lot about the basic operation of the factory and how it's working. I mentioned MT Connect data. This is an example of some of the MT Connect data that we're collecting off of controllers of our CNC machines. In this particular case is spindle speed, and the different colors are the depth of cut on the CNC machine. And over here we have spindle load. Another very important aspect of monitoring machines is predictive maintenance. And as many of you probably know, the component that fails the quickest in machinery are the bearings. And here's a representation of a typical roller bearing, where we have the rolling elements, the inner race, the outer race, and the cage. And various faults can be accomplished with roller element bearings, such as outer race defects, roller element defects, and cage defects. Well, the nice thing, I guess, about these defects is that they have very distinct signatures as far as when a particular defect happens. So if there's an inner race defect, a ball pass frequency can be calculated from the vibration of the bearing, and from various parameters such as its speed and the diameter of the shaft. And what these calculations provide are a set of frequencies that, when placed on a frequency spectrum, they can be analyzed. And if there's frequencies on an FFT output that are to within a certain set of combinations of the natural frequency, then the chances that there is a problem with that particular bearing is fairly well correlated. So by making use of the architecture, this is an example of a very direct way in which data from these accelerometers can be used for predictive maintenance. So that's kind of a very short overview of some of the things that we're doing at the Manufacturing Institute at Georgia Tech. We work with dozens of different companies and a whole variety of different projects. I hope this provided a little bit of overview of some of the interesting things. And I would encourage you that if these seem to match well with your needs, to contact us. And also, as Alon said, on November 11th of this year, we'll be conducting an IoT for manufacturing workshop. Typically it was live, but this year we'll be doing it online. We've had great speakers over the years, and all of the presentations that have been made for the past 5 years are online. You can download those and take a look at what was discussed. You can go to FIS.tech.edu, and there's some links in the menu to the workshops and some of our work. So with that, I will pass it back to Alon, and thank you very much for your time, and I hope this was of interest, and enjoy the rest of the presentations.
Andy, just a question. Can you hear me, Andy?
Pardon me?
Okay, Andy, just a question, because it's important for these building blocks that we are trying to explore. And since you've spent a lot of time on that, if you could say a word, it's about legacy systems. That's one of the major roadblocks, because here we are designing things for the future. We are all excited, but companies have not waited for us to do business and to make money. So therefore, the big question is, how do you bridge legacy systems with the future, with this new technology and this new digitalization framework? I know, Andy, you've published articles on that. And if you could say just a quick word on that.
Sure, yeah, thank you. That's actually a very good question. It's like, well, it's great that you're using all these cloud technologies and Internet of Things, etc., but the average age of machine tool in US manufacturing is 16 years. So when we go out to factories and students say, well, where's the Ethernet port on the back of this machine? Or many times there's not an Ethernet port, much less, some other ways of communicating with the outside world. So what we do in that case is we make use of the retrofit kits that are attached to the machines, which collect data. And those retrofit kits can either add data monitoring to machines that don't already have monitoring, or can extend the amount of data that's collected off of those machines. And it does not require any type of computer upgrade, etc. It's a non-invasive device that is attached to the machine and collects that data and sends it to the applications. And that project was funded through an organization called DMDII, which is now MXD. But thank you for the question.
Jim, do we have any other, perhaps one question before we move to Chad, or should we move to the next speaker?
There is a question, but I think that it's best to save, because the person wanted to ask all of the panelists. So let's get through everyone and then move.
All right. Thank you, Jim. So I'm very pleased to introduce Chad, because Chad is with Michelin, and Michelin happens to be on our with a member of our center, which we call CDATE. By the way, it's our center, which tries to have an overarching view of the Internet of Things space, has just moved from the Research Institute at Georgia Tech to the Ivan Allen College of Liberal Arts, and more precisely, the Center for Advanced Communications Policy within the School of Public Policy. It might be a little how can I say, remotely connected to our discussion today, but actually it's very much centered on what we are discussing, because the policy aspect of the space and digitalization is very important. And as a matter of fact, a few months ago, Representative Richard Hudson from Carolina introduced a bill in the House of Representatives on advancing IoT manufacturing. And when you look at the bill, you'll see that the questions that the congressman is wondering about completely fit to a T what we are trying to discuss today and explore today. So Chad has a very interesting profile for this discussion this afternoon, because he's really an engineer, an engineer's engineer, I would say. He spent 15 years in very important engineering functions, either at Itron. For those who don't know, it's a very important company engaged in energy and water management, headquartered in the state of Washington. And of course, for about 10 years, I would say now, Chad, that you've been working with Michelin. Of course, I will let you describe your company. But what's interesting is been working, in the testing mode, in the testing field, as well as being in charge of a plant, which of course is very important for us when we're trying to see what's happening when the proverbial rubber meets the proverbial road. So with this, Chad, I will let you to explain how your perspective on this digital transformation for manufacturing.
All right, I appreciate it, Alan. Thank you. Let me share my screen here. So hopefully you guys can see this in presentation mode.
Yes.
All right, so I'm Chad Corbin. My official title inside Michelin is the Digital Manufacturing Champion for the Americas. And I've been with Michelin for just under 10 years now. I started working with projects around the world. So I actually worked on the implementation and startup of a brand new factory in China. I worked on developing laser equipment for rectification of tires in Germany, and I've done extensive work with the folks in France on project management to program management, and several factories throughout the Americas zone also. I currently have a responsibility that covers North and South America. So we have roughly 23 to 24 manufacturing sites in that zone. And they cover everything from earth-moving tires to aviation to elastomers, materials, semi-finished products, mixing products, raw materials, and also your tourism cars and long-haul truck type operations. So it's the full gamut of stuff. It's a very interesting position working with all those different manufacturing sides. So Andrew talked a lot about the technology in it. I am an engineer. I love that side of it. And I'm going to talk probably more on the people side and what Michelin's doing as far as the process of this change. So digital manufacturing being part of a industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. It's a change in the way that we think inside manufacturing, and so that change is not significant, or it is very significant. It's not small in size, and it truly does affect a broad spectrum across our manufacturing. So we have a digital activities director. He handles digital from a company standpoint, not just manufacturing side, but also on the business side, so sales, marketing. And these are kind of some of the things that he put out there, and I think they're pretty interesting, that it's 95% human resources, 5% technology resources. And there's three main modes of this transformation, with adoption with the business models to changing the way that we work, and then also simplifying our processes. are probably the three major areas that we see in Michelin that it really affects. So in Michelin as a whole, about 4 years ago, we set a vision for the company, or a strategy for the company, to advance in 4 main topics, digitalization being one of those 4 main topics. Empowerment, simplification, and customer centricity being the other ones. So digitalization is a very extensive topic inside Michelin, stemming to all parts of the company. And so, but I work on the manufacturing side of it. And these 3 things actually apply very, very much to our factories also. And so the way that we apply it inside the manufacturing side is that we have something first and foremost that we leverage, which is Michelin Manufacturing Way, or MMW, which you see here, is a way that we manage our daily processes inside the factory. From 5-minute briefings and stuff at the beginning of the shift, to the way that the frontline supervisors do shop floor tours, all the way up to the management principles like S&OP side of things. And then the MAPP is more of the empowerment of the people to solve their own problems. And that's more advanced once you get beyond just the daily management, is to really empower a shop to manage their own business. And empower the people to make the progress, to solve their own problems, and become very empowered in the way they work. So we felt that digital manufacturing fit directly on with that, and it really helps us accelerate that through the sharing of information. So what we did is we talked to them, and we started introducing digital manufacturing to them, and I went around every factory in this zone and built roadmaps with them. So educate them on the process, plus build roadmaps with them. And one of the principles that we use is think big, start small. So when you build these roadmaps, you may have ambitions on quality, you may have ambitions on productivity, you may have ambitions, each factory is different, that they want to leverage digital for. And that's an important part, is digital is, we're trying not to make it its own silo, but it's a lever for progress and competitiveness in all spectrums. And so whenever we think about a subject, we want to think about that far out goal. How do we think that's going to look 2-3 years from now, but then take it in small pieces. And this really helps, because if you enter into an ambition and you say that I need the equivalency of 3 people to complete this task over the next 2 years, a lot of those tend to get scrutinized pretty deeply, because resources and headcount are very difficult to come by sometimes, and are constrained inside our factories. So starting small allows to take those small bites and say, hey, I only need 8 hours to accomplish this piece of it, and then start to show that value and stuff, and start to raise the expectations for that effort. And you'll start to see that acceleration and that capturing of value earlier in the project versus later in the project. We also look at a mixture of top-down, bottom-up. So whenever we do the education side, we try to educate everybody across the spectrum. So typically those workshops with the factories, we're on the magnitude of 50 people. Our factories normally, I should say, range from a population of 450 to over 2,000 people at a facility. We work in workshops of about 50 people to educate them. Then we scale that off once we do the roadmaps to some of the people that have more insight on those subjects. So you can see here, it's really aimed at the shop floor, frontline managers, support teams, management, customers. It's really all embracing. So this subject really is about everybody and the people itself. And we want to make sure that people understand that first and foremost, it is truly about the people, and how we can bring their competencies and skill sets to new levels. So a bit of a case study. This is probably something that most people are probably pretty familiar with. When it talks about change, you have roughly about 15% of your population that will be an early adopter. We see this in society, we see this in our factories also. But that 15% is great, but the value is when you can affect that 85%. And you can start to affect a larger portion of the population. And so, as I talked about, I'm a digital champion, and here in this little cartoonish type thing, you tend to see this with people. That 85% will say, no, we're not interested, or we're too busy, or we don't have the resources and things. And they continue to work in the same modes that they had been before, which typically we're trying to provide them an experience that may provide them a way to do their job with less effort. And so that's really what digital champions provide, is these experiences. A lot of times when companies put together a champion, they think they're responsible for the whole package, where honestly they're part of that change more than anything. They're able to provide the experiences to the people and show them these new processes, and also facilitate the collaboration and stuff. But it's really the leaderships that need to set these expectations to create new habits and behaviors in the people. And then those habits and behaviors become culture. And that's where we see the value, is when we start affecting that portion of the population. And so we really seen that recently in something that happened here with the whole pandemic. And so what you see in the bottom left of the screen here is actual data from Michelin, just on Teams, leveraging these new tools with Microsoft Teams, and the usage went up by 25%. And it's not just in North America. We've seen a very identical trend in South America. And if I extended that out to Asia and also Europe, I'm sure we'd see the same jump. Now, we talked about the 15% being the early adopters. We started utilizing Teams roughly 2 years ago. You can see the adoption of people going to Teams meetings and stuff being up around the 48% mark here in North America. But then the pandemic struck, and we see a jump of about 25%. And the big thing that really changed in all this was, one, the need that the pandemic, but the leadership expectation changed. They weren't willing to stop the business because of the pandemic. It must go on. And so therefore we have to find a way to do this. How do we continue to promote our business and move forward in our business in this pandemic world where we couldn't be near each other, or be in the same meeting rooms, or maybe we couldn't even be in the factories. The factories had stopped due to the situation that was going on. So we see how powerful that piece of it is when the leadership sets these expectations, and we start to see these habits and behaviors start to change very quickly. That potential always lived within the population. It's just we've seen a renewed focus in the leadership and setting that expectation for it, and that acceleration of that change. We see this same thing as I had an experience a year and a half ago. As we were doing these roadmaps, we did a consolidation of roadmaps among several facilities, and the director asked me to do this, and he put an expectation out there that there would be zero travel. We ended up experimenting and doing a workshop with 6 different factories, 30 people from 3 different countries over the span of 2 days, and it was very successful, and nobody traveled. And it really pushed us to find tools to help us. One of the tools that we found was an infinite whiteboard application online. We chose Miro, but there's plenty of them out there. And we chose this way to collaborate. So we've seen the acceleration and adoption through that period as those factories went on and started leveraging it. Some of the things that we see, we talked about IoTs, and one of the things that we see that's huge for us and has been there pre-pandemic, but now the adoption of it is accelerated through post-pandemic or into the pandemic, was the use of augmented reality. Our factories are now outfitted with augmented reality glasses and stuff for remote tech assist, remote quality troubleshooting, and these people are starting to leverage it. Those trends should carry on after the pandemic and be really cost effective for the facilities. When we talk about somebody traveling to a factory for a week, you're looking at several thousands of dollars just for that travel. Well, Michelin has about 100,000 people worldwide, and we have a very large travel budget with 70 different sites worldwide. So that's a huge impact for our business, is to be able to cut down on some of that travel. We don't want to remove it, but to reduce it is a big impact to our business. So a little bit how we leverage this in a worldwide approach. Up here at the top of it, DOMF, that is our manufacturing operations worldwide. And underneath that, we have the program management, which is where, in collaboration, so this is Greenville and Clermont-Ferrand, France. So the program management for digital manufacturing is run by myself and some folks in France. We are considered the program managers for that. We have another group over here, which is a steering committee about our new technologies, new things that we want to do. So if we want to investigate things that like AI, typically they go through this stream and then they're industrialized and then they come into this stream. And so that's where you see their connection is deep into explore topics. And when we talk about explore topics, that's something that's different for us also, is we explore methods more than we explore individual applications. So we explore IoT as a whole, and then we industrialize that application and allow the factories to enter into applying that methodology to any process that they would want to. And so over here on the program management side, that's where this happens, is from an explore topic, they go to the build team industrializes it, and then we have 6 factories that we've chosen worldwide to help us lead the adoption into the factories. So we have 2 in the Americas, we have 3 in Europe, and 1 in Asia. And these factories have teams that actually deploy different things to other sites. Now, it's not to say that they go to those sites to do it, but they help those sites in applying it. And so here you'll also see Pune. Each one of these teams have people from Pune, India connected to them too, to accelerate this advancement also. So we leverage a true worldwide approach in what we do. Even the exploration topics and stuff are done directly with the factories. We don't try to go off into a office somewhere and develop something. We truly try to take what the factories need and develop it with the factories. And this approach is a bit of a change for Michelin. We typically develop something and then roll it out to the factories. Here we're asking the factories to develop with us and us to develop in the factories. So it's more actually of a software mindset, and you hear a lot of that with the digital side of things, with beta testing and Scrum type formats. That is exactly how we leverage this approach. But we also collaborate worldwide. And so what we actually see here is a dashboard that we have, and there's more information to this dashboard, but it allows the factories to go there, and each one of these is a different factory, and you can see Shenyang, or SY2 is actually Shenyang 2 in China. It's our factory there. And you can see that they're extremely ambitious on applying the digitalization lever. Worldwide, we have roughly 1,500 or over 1,500 use cases that the factories are starting to apply. And these use cases are things from, just as Andrew spoke about, how do we monitor our processes in certain ways to get these feedbacks, to do early detection of failures, maybe some process monitoring for quality checks that we couldn't do before, to be able to push those validation processes back to where the products are being made. So our aim is we actually do some destructive testing inside our factory to check our product. Can we get the validations and stuff all the way back at the process where we don't have to do those things? And so can you be 100% sure, or as close as you can to 100%, that whenever something leaves one process and moves to the next, is it fit into the specs that are needed in order to make that next process successful? And so we leverage this. The factories can come in here and investigate, so that if they want to know what Shenyang's doing, they can click on here, they can go through and look at all the different things that they're doing. They can also look at different ways that they're applying things. So use cases, we assign them. So if I think about use case 13, that's process parameter monitoring. And we have foundational tools that we're deploying to our factories. These foundational tools are mainly in how we're going to store. So it's a portion of the ecosystem that Andrew talked about. We have one system that does time series data gathering. We have one system that's going to consolidate relational data. And then we have another system that's going to help us deal with unstructured data. And whenever we talk about unstructured data, we talk about things like images or voice. And so we actually have use cases on, if an operator has a problem on a machine, instead of having to type in the issue and produce a work order, can they just talk through the problem? And then that gets recorded into the system, and then the maintenance people get it from there. So we have lots of these things going on, and they're in all different facets. And it's extremely interesting to see who's taking advantage of what, and then whenever they do take advantage of it, then be able to share that experience back with the other factories worldwide. And so that's kind of our approach to it as Michelin. It's been extremely good over the past 2 years is where I've been since the official launch, but I've been involved in digital manufacturing for probably going on 4 years now within Michelin. I was involved in helping develop this program before it was actually officially a platform within Michelin. Thank you. Alan?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Two thoughts. First, you've demonstrated very well what John highlighted at the very beginning, which is the connection between increased digitalization and globalization. You showed the worldwide collaboration and how those things are intricated and interwoven together. I mean, as you are getting more digital, as it were, you have to collaborate more internationally. The second thought here is we manufacture to produce things that are going to be sold. And And Michelin is certainly can be the poster child for this Industry 4.0 that you were talking about. Can you talk a little bit how this digitalization has completely overhauled the business model at Michelin, going from selling a product, tires, to now selling services and platforms?
And,
yes.
And Chad, before you start, just to roll into that, we also have a question from the attendees that fits in that, which is, can you talk to the productivity gains that resulted from your efforts?
Okay. Yes. So Michelin as a whole, so we went through a transformation, or we're going through a transformation, and even how we structure our business. And one of the things that was launched was a service and solution entity within Michelin. So we see digitalization as a company as a whole is going to change the dynamic in the way that we offer solutions. On the customer centricity side, we're entering into ventures with Amazon, which is something that's kind of new for us, right? So whenever you think about Amazon and shipping tires, that's a big thing that you're going to be shipping to a customer. The shipping cost, the logistics associated with that, we're seeing that start to evolve and start to even impact how we design things. And so that feedback's coming back, and then that evolves our manufacturing process. Then on the other side of it is we're starting to see, we have indicators called ISL, or our fill rates, which is how you actually make the product available when the customer needs it. And that instant feedback now is actually creating this dynamic within our factories that wasn't there, and reactivity that wasn't there before. Before, we would get our forecast mainly on a weekly basis. We typically locked in at about a month's time span. And now we're seeing that shrink to under 2 weeks. And we're starting to see those adjustments and having to adapt to the environment. So that's a big thing on flexibility for our factories, especially on the TC or tourism side, that we're starting to see. Predictability on the long haul truck and bus, or even mining, it's a little more stable. So digitalization as a whole, from the business side to the factory side, and from the factory side back to the business side, it's changing dramatically as this information is becoming more and more readily available. On what was the question again from the person? I want to make sure I address it. Productivity gains. Actually, we see more effect, and I'm going to share my screen. There was a slide that I did not show that actually affects that. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So productivity is actually fairly low. And the reason behind this is mainly because whenever we talk about digitalization, we're really optimizing people and assets, and people being assets also. So if we optimize the labor associated with it, or the utilization of the asset, we see big gains in that. Now, that does correspond to productivity outputs, or average capability of productivity outputs from a factory. But just sheer productivity gains, like I'm going to take a piece of equipment's capability of 100%, whenever it's 100% up from 1,000 units, say, a day to 1,200 units per day. Digitalization we haven't seen the big impact on that. It's actually making us more effective with the assets that we do have.
All right. Thank you very much, Chad. So now we're gonna listen to our next speaker, Dr. Chris Ludgen, who is Associate Director of the Renewable BioProducts Institute. I'm assuming you are hearing me well?
Yes, thank you, Alain.
Okay, good. So just a word about Dr. Ludgen. He has a beautiful academic journey, started as a Bronco and morphed into a Yellow Jacket, which means he started at Western Michigan and landed at Georgia Tech. We're very happy for that, where he got his doctorate. But again, like for Andy Dugenske, what makes his profile extremely attractive to us this afternoon is that not only is a great academic researcher, but also he has been involved in industry for quite some time. He's an alum of Scott Paper and also of Kimberly Clark, a former member of CIBER, by the way. And also currently, he has, of course, plenty of outstanding distinctions, as you can imagine, but also he's the current chairman of the board of the Technical Association of the Pulp and Paper Industry, meaning that, again, he's got his proverbial rubber sticking to the proverbial road. So with this, Chris, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you, John and Jim, for asking me to present. So I would like to talk specifically about my industry and how we're looking at the future and see if it applies to perhaps your industry as well. Talking about Industry 4.0 for this industry. Just to introduce you and the Renewable Bioproducts Institute, we're one of the 11 interdisciplinary research institutes of Georgia Tech. We report to the EVPR, and we're engaged typically across the colleges of engineering and sciences with at least 6 schools of faculty that are engaged with us in collaborative research. We have this legacy endowment that supports a very healthy graduate student program of about 40 PhD students who are working on theses that benefit our member companies and our industry. We have this vision of being the premier institute for advanced translational research and to be that portal for industry to enter into Georgia Tech. So I am a professor of the practice, an industry liaison for RBI. We have faculty support, of course, for these fellowships and seed money for research. We offer these fellowships. We also collaborate quite a bit with the IRIs, including the Manufacturing Institute earlier mentioned. We also have testing services for our member companies. We held quite a few workshops, both now virtually, but also face-to-face over the years. We have an educational program very steeped in the graduate program, but also teaching our undergraduates in pulp and paper. And we have a very vital and unique paper museum at Georgia Tech, the only museum at Georgia Tech on the history of papermaking. So we have our roots in Appleton, Wisconsin as the Institute of Paper Chemistry. I was a PhD student at the time and helped that move to Georgia Tech in 1989, became fully affiliated in 93 and merged in 2003 as part of Georgia Tech, and recently rebranded in 2014 as the Renewable Bioproducts Institute, recognizing that we do more than just paper-based research. We offer these 4-year fellowships and across the 4 participating schools, currently approximately 40 graduate students. We also offer a master's in manufacturing leadership. This is a combination of leadership skills taught from the Scheller College of Business, business acumen, manufacturing best practices. There are courses from our #1 rated industrial engineering school and a manufacturing concentration, which I teach 2 industry-focused electives on the paper industry. And my own research for the undergraduates and graduate students, top of the list, their applications of big data analytics in transforming the paper industry. Currently have 1 PhD student in this area, Jin-Hyun Kim, who's applying big data analytics to the paper machine proper and how we can predict quality based upon online measurement of upstream characteristics. And we'll talk more about that as my slides continue. I have other areas of interest, of course, in nanocellulose, a novel new material for the world, nanocellulose crystals, procedures, and characterization. I do quite a bit with dye stuffs for our sponsor companies, and biodegradable compostable replacements for plastics. And another area is in bio-based flushable wet wipes. So this is an area that employs quite a few graduate and undergraduate students. So just a couple of slides on the background here. It's one of the 4 great inventions from China. In 105 AD, we attribute the invention of paper to this inventor of the court, Cai Lun. These tools and processes remain pretty much the same for almost 2,000 years. And the original paper, we have a lot of news these days around cannabis, around hemp, but the original paper, 105 AD, was made from ropes of hemp and reconstituted to make paper-making products. And you see on the left-hand side what an ancient paper-making process would look like. Well, that same process lasted for at least 1,700 years. And you see this vat person on the right with a decal of wire in a vat of pulp, wet pulp, making a sheet of paper that was then pressed by the lay boy, a pressman, and then drying with evaporative drying in the sun. And this is how things went about until about 1850s. We started seeing continuous paper machines. And this is a Robert paper machine of a continuous wire pulling the sheet out and running maybe 20 feet per minute. And so this is the machine that lasted for quite a while. But I also want to attribute some history here. This is my great-grandfather who invented the dryer, was part of the invention of the dryer can that made this paper evaporatively dry and make it continuous. And that was after the 1850s. And with the money he got and a couple of gold medals at World Trade Fair, he was able to create a couple of paper mills. Now today we have very high-speed machines, and we estimate over 900,000 employees in the US are involved in the paper industry, and it represents about 4.5% of our gross domestic product. These are very high-speed machines that require quite a bit of maintenance, very capital intensive, but not really advanced to the point where we could talk about big data analytics. We talk about online instrumentation in the paper industry to look at a distributed control system. We talk about how we utilize that data to try to troubleshoot, but there's a lot of domain knowledge of engineers and operators and maintenance people required to operate these paper machines at very high speeds. Just to give you an idea of how speeds have progressed over the years. This is a chart by Voith Corporation, one of the 3 big equipment suppliers of paper machine equipment in the world. A German-based company, also has a manufacturing facility in Sao Paulo, Brazil. But over the decades, you see how speed has escalated on these machines. The maximum speeds now, I understand, here in 2020 is up in the 7,000 feet per minute range. We also see the width of these paper machines. So wider, faster machines has been the story of these machines over the decades. And now you see 450-inch wide machines making a continuous web of paper in tons and tons and tons per hour on these paper machines. So where we saw as late as the 1950s, 8 men, maybe no shoes, because shoes would rot too fast in these wet forming processes, gathered around a paper machine, keeping it running. Now we see maybe 3 people in a very air-conditioned operating room. One of them might be in charge of testing the turn-up of a machine to see if we're still within control every 45 minutes, every hour. We might see one person who's actually trained as a maintenance person or electrician, and another person who's operating the machine fully by the distributed control system monitor in the control room. The labor density over these decades has certainly changed. A number of step changes have occurred as we've gotten better and better at the total people hours per ton of production. And this has resulted in manufacturing jobs being maintained in the United States. You still see paper machines in the United States. It's very difficult, challenging to transport these rolls around globally, internationally, to get them converted into the finished product. So you see maintaining of jobs, thus 900,000 jobs employed in the United States. So the labor trends and why we call to alarm this issue is, what is that next step change in labor density? We can only get so fast. For a lightweight tissue, for instance, facial tissue, running 7,000 feet per minute on one of these big wide paper machines. How much farther can we really physically go with the speed of machines and motors and dewatering of this wet pulp. The average age of a practicing engineer is also very alarming. Over 56 years of age is the average age of a practicing engineer. Why was that? Well, in some cases, we've not, as a paper industry, replenished the talent stream. There's this huge gap between in the manufacturing sector caused by, in many cases, zero hiring during recent economic downturns. And so we see the severe sense among our member companies and throughout the industry that there's a lack of domain knowledge to operate and maintain, let alone troubleshoot problems when they occur on the paper machines themselves. So we talk about big data. There's literally hundreds of thousands of signals coming into a distributed control system from an integrated pulp and paper mill every second. And what do we do with it? We're underutilizing it. And the paper industry recognizes that we're probably behind other industries when it comes to utilizing data and building in some form of smart manufacturing into our systems. So we're trying to move to this use of data to be better in control and monitoring. And a couple of faculty members at Georgia Tech who I've collaborated with over the years include Nagi Gabriel from the Industrial Engineering School, who's done some great work on sensor-based predictive analytics and machine learning, predicting a motor's failure so that a mill can understand what my spare parts inventory needs to be. How many hours away can I have that spare motor for running one of these high-speed paper machines without causing a tremendous amount of downtime, and utilizing the data that has been accumulated across many industries, not just the paper industry, on what predictive analytics need to be for smart applications of monitoring and condition monitoring and predictive monitoring of my assets. And the other professor that I worked with quite a bit is Dr. Cameron Panabar, also from industrial engineering. And a collaboration we've done for a company, it's not really a startup company anymore, it's been in existence about 3 or 4 years now, called Process Miner, based here in Atlanta. And they look at real-time utilization of that distributed control system output for predicting quality, for alarming operators and engineers that something is going to happen perhaps hours from now, maybe even a day from now, unless we do something about it. Controlling the situation and troubleshooting when problems occur. All of these things, and every second, rather than waiting for that 45-minute to an hour for a roll to physically be finished, being produced on the dry end of a paper machine, kicked out and tested in the lab perhaps 30 minutes later. We're trying to predict the problem every second. And so this takes a lot of data analysis. Dr. Gabriel is this interface of condition monitoring and reliability. I welcome you to look at a presentation he gave at our RBI executive conference in 2016, but much work has been done since then, of course. But just so you look at maybe the rbi.getech.edu site, you'll find the presentations from many, many years now of RBI executive conferences, including Dr. Gabriel's. And this process miner using big data to predict manufacturing output and continuous learning. This real-time utilization, but constant learning of what's new, what's happening that's causing my prediction to be good or bad at what the physical test is going to be. And the question we always have to ask ourselves is, will there be fewer engineers and trained personnel in the future? Will there be less domain knowledge on the operating floor? Will I want to have fewer people per ton of production? And is it possible then I'm going to remotely control or remotely at least monitor my operation on a continuous basis? I had an experience teaching one of my online master's degree students here this past term, just coming to conclusion now. But it was an employee of one of our large member companies, and he was exposed at work to someone who tested positive for COVID. He was then sent home. He's the superintendent of this paper machine, and he's sent home during some critical operating times for quarantine for 14 days. But he was able to, from his home, monitor his machine, and if he really wanted to, control some aspects of it, although that is potentially unsafe unless people are really aware of it, but he was fully able to monitor every second all of the instrumentation, all the speeds of his machine, his productivity, and look at his quality data. So we're there. It's just a question of using the data to better predict what's going to happen. So this is a slide from Process Miner. The idea is you have, right now, let's say there are 147 US-based companies making paper.
Chris?
Yes, I'm sorry.
This is absolutely fascinating, and we want to make sure that people have time to ask you questions. Can we wrap up this in 1 minute? Is it possible?
I will certainly do. This just gives you an idea of how we look at this system. It could be across many mills, utilizing data across many mills. This is what an integrated mill might look like, from wood through the reel of a paper machine. And we look at, in Process Miner's world, how data will flow to a cloud-based platform and can be then utilized either at the executive headquarters or at a engineer's facility within the mill or outside of the mill. And you can look at various problems throughout the operation on online instrumentation or visual observations or testing upstream. And you can tell from this process, very complex, continuous operation in making paper, that we're talking about a facility that has many data points, has facilities that are going to give you data maybe days in advance. That wood is being chipped into individual sizes, perhaps days in advance of it actually being made into paper. So in conclusion, the pulp paper industry is interested in this. The savings potential, we believe, is about $10 million per year, over 500,000 ton producers per mill. There's over 150 mills of that capacity in the United States. 90% of all these mills, we believe, lack sufficient and advanced measurement in order to control, and a small percentage have some type of data analysis programs, but it's really not pervasive throughout the industry. The mills currently lack skilled engineers, especially in process control, and there are some long-term HR issues that we've talked about. And what Process Miner offers is a subscription to enhance the capabilities of the engineering staff of the mill. And some major pulp and paper companies seem to be willing to pay for these kinds of professional services. Many people think the paper industry is suffering. However, I would tell you that fluff pulp, specialty grades, tissue, packaging, certainly during COVID, everyone buying electronically, packaging is certainly in a boom. I want to thank our member companies who have supported this. In many cases, these companies thought here 2 years ago that the #1 proposal that we submitted at Georgia Tech that deserved funding was in big data analytics, of over 40 proposals that were submitted by the Georgia Tech faculty. So these companies are very supportive of this kind of thing. I'd welcome your input. I'm the Associate Director of Pulp and Paper. Dr. Carson Meredith is our Executive Director. Dr. Matthew Ralph is also an Associate Director. So I would open it up to questions.
Thank you so very much, Chris. I mean, I would love to listen to you all day. This is fascinating. Jim, do you have questions from the audience, maybe about, for the three speakers?
The main question that I wanted to save to the end, because the questioner had asked to ask all of the panelists, is I'll shorten it here. What are some of the countries that you expect to be most competitive in digital manufacturing over the next several years? Are there any new countries expected to join the leading countries, or any existing countries expected to fall out of the leading group of countries?
I mean, it's a question for all of us, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so in addition to the usual players like Germany, Korea, Japan, China, this is what you're talking about?
It definitely, that seems to be what the person has asked, yes.
Okay. Obviously, I mean, we see some recent efforts in Brazil that they've been late to come to the party, but now they're accelerating their move. But across the board, I mean, whether it's in Asia or in Latin America, we see people adopting this concept of Industry 4.0 because for the very reason that they feel if they don't do it, they're going to fall behind. Maybe the others have something to other perspectives.
This is Andy. I agree. I think most countries are looking to enhance their digital manufacturing activities and don't see too many that have fallen behind significantly. I think, of course, China and Germany are maybe most notable for their advances. Of course, the United States is doing a lot in these areas. So it's kind of
Perhaps
turning into a horse race.
one thing we saw, we are seeing is that countries that are aging, China, Japan, Korea, Germany. Germany is not slowing, it's shrinking. These countries put a tremendous effort in developing robots, tele-robotic operation, cobots. So because, and I think that was the common thread throughout the presentation, we see a lack of skill hitting us very quickly, and therefore we need to prepare for that. And when you have a population that is shrinking, that is quite an impetus to find a solution.
I agree, Alan. One thing about skills too, maybe highlighting what Chad said, is there are the skills kind of on the floor or boots on the ground, but then I think there's really a need for skills of upper management to say, this is what we need to do, and to provide the guidance and leadership for companies without just saying, well, we need to do something, but actually have the people that both have the interpersonal skills that can motivate the organization and the technical skills in order to choose winners and losers as far as technology and implementation.
No, I 100% agree with that. That's one of our biggest efforts, is to look at the competencies that people have, and especially as we hire new quality technicians or new maintenance people, do they have these analytic type skills in this area in order to do this deeper learning, I'll call it, with our processes, to learn new things that we didn't know about our processes or our machines as a whole. If I had to look at countries that are excelling, I'll show one more thing. I know I like to show slides, but it's interesting that you asked that. So if we look at Industry 4.0 as a whole, Germany entered in the race quite early in the going. North America was there pretty early. And as Alan alluded to, Brazil was maybe a little later to the game. But to be honest, we see a lot of acceleration, especially with these countries. I don't know if you're going to see a country necessarily fall out. I think you're going to see the countries continue to accelerate.
One question, mostly for Chad, was what is the biggest challenge that you see, because it was a question about companies, the challenges for your company that you see due to the COVID-19 situation?
So the biggest challenge that I would say we've had on the manufacturing side was the ability to get into the factory. That's caused probably the slowing of some of the implementations of some of the things that we wanted to do. That's been, I would say, the biggest thing that's hampered our process or our progress within digital. Now, on the other side of that, what the pandemic has done is allowed us some time to start developing knowledge in our people with training and things. And now, hopefully, as the pandemic starts to slow and they go back to the factories and we are able to get into the factories, we start to see the competency growth.
I do have a question. Thank you. I have a question for Chris. The question is, what do you think situations like COVID-19 would change in the process of the paper and pulp industry in terms of letting AI and machine learning managing complex operations with limited skilled labor availability? And we got like 1 minute.
Yeah, certainly. I think what it allows people to do is do this kind of predictive maintenance work remotely. So you can have condition monitoring on site as long as people are maintaining the condition monitoring devices, the sensors. As long as you have those things on site being maintained properly by maintenance and operations people. The engineering work of ordering, the purchasing of equipment, the inventory control, all of those things can happen with good monitoring systems off-site at corporate. This is the vision I think that my industry has for the situation, is that they can do this more centralized, less feet on the ground at the facility, and the belief is that we will have less feet on the ground in the future. So I think it's very enhancing.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you to our panelists and our moderator. And I think in the interest of time, we'll move straight on to the next panel. So to introduce, we will be moving for the opening remarks to Mr. Ani Agnihotri.
Jim, actually, John Woodward is going to give a welcome first.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, I had that reversed. Yes, my good friend John Woodward. I'm gonna put you on spotlight.
That's all right. Thank you, Jim. Thanks so much, and I won't take anyone's time here real quick. I just want to welcome everybody to the second session. That first was indeed very interesting, and I'm glad there were so many questions coming in about it. I'm John Woodward. I head up the global commerce team for the Metro Atlanta Chamber, which covers the 29 county metropolitan area. And we are pleased to partner again with UIBS, with Georgia Tech CIBER, for this series of seminars and workshops. It's been valuable year after year, and we always like seeing the content coming through here. Ani is, I think introductions and bios were sent out in advance, so I won't do that. And Ani is going to moderate our panel coming up in the second session of some of the leading foreign-owned enterprises, FOEs, here in Georgia and metropolitan Atlanta, certainly Kia. We're glad to have back. And Peugeot Citroën, mes amis at Groupe PSA, Vincent. And then also I want to give a shout out, actually, just a sidebar here, or coincidental, to Dev Ahuja with Novellus. I actually had another seminar this morning, that's 7 o'clock this morning, 4:30 Mumbai time, with the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce in Mumbai. And actually had Satish Pai, the managing director of Hindalco, Novellus parent company, was one of the panelists there. And curiously enough, I'm not making this up, everybody, this very topic, the digital transformation of manufacturing, was brought up in this other discussion, which was just a scant few hours ago. And some of the leading CEOs of some of the top companies in India who were part of this session, including Hindalco, were discussing this. So it's a frightfully timely subject. Kudos to Ani and the team for coming up with this. And again, the panelists for discussing it. I think it's on top of everyone's mind, and its relevance could not be. With that, I will pass on the baton to Ani, and again, welcome everybody. I'm pleased to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. All right. Thanks, John. I appreciate it. We appreciate support from Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce for the last 10 years or so. First of all, I would like to thank my co-presenting partner, Dr. John McIntyre from Georgia Tech CIBER, as well as my colleague, Jim Hoadley, for thanking and putting this virtual event for the first time. We are doing it because of COVID situation. We are running a little bit behind in terms of time, so I would like to jump straightway into my session. And the bios of all our speakers are with the BIOS and program which we had circulated. First of all, I would request Mr. Stuart Countess, who is CEO and Senior Vice President for Kia Motors Manufacturing in Georgia. And he has been in this position. He's responsible for plants production division, overseeing operations of 4 manufacturing shops, as well as production, control and maintenance, etc. Before that, Stuart was Chief Administrative Officer for Kia, looking after HR and admin, to kick off his remarks. And Stuart, if I may, please take about 15 minutes for your presentation.
No problem. Let me see if I can pull up this presentation. So it should be able to see it.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's good to be back. We were fortunate to participate last year. Clearly this year has already been discussed, has been had its own set of challenges. In talking with Ani, what I'd like to talk a little bit about is what has COVID-19 done to us as a manufacturing operation. We certainly, like many, experienced at the end of March, basically a complete shutdown of our facility. The month of April, we did not produce anything, and then we kind of sporadically produced throughout the month of May, going into June, and have now finally gotten ourselves back up to a normal operation, which for us is a 3-shift operation. But that being said, it's been full of challenges, challenges in how that we reimagine our factory working with the 2,700 employees that we have, how we communicate during the time the factory was down. So there's been a lot of, again, to not overuse a term, but reimagining. It's been surprising, and I know Vincent will probably talk a little more on this, but there was a lot of prediction early on, at least in the automotive industry, what the overall annual impact was going to be, and it's been quite significant when you look at all the different OEMs. But surprisingly, there has been somewhat of a buying mode, not anywhere near what we anticipated. There's a lot of people that argue that there's some pent-up money, that people have gone out and are still purchasing cars. So for us, that's something we like to see. We have kind of been at an advantage over the last couple of months, and that we've been introducing new products into the market, so that certainly has also benefited us. But nonetheless, we had to change how we were going to bring people back to work in a safe manner. So the first slide is just it's the same stuff that we've continually heard, obviously, for the last 3 to 4 months. But now we have to apply that into our work areas. So one of the things that we had to go in and look initially was in our normal line manufacturing concept, we had to reallocate all of the different work to create as much space as possible between the different individuals that work in there. So you can run a normal speed on your line, but now you have to take jobs and split them up more, trying as much as you can to alternate, say, a left and a right, a front and a rear, which may or may not have already been done, but in some cases, it did require some significant movement within our factory. There were things that we put in to try to bring our factory back up and remain safe. Those included, we scanned everyone coming into our facility with temperature checks. That's been done by a number of companies now, but we were early on doing that. So whenever you come in the morning or you leave at lunchtime, you have to go through a temperature check. And if you hit a certain threshold, then of course, then we refer you to our medical group, or you have to seek medical validation. Also, there's a series of questions, the same ones that have also been widely published, where individuals are asked, have you been out of the country in the past 14 days? Have you been near anyone who's been diagnosed in the last 14 days? But again, it's a reminder to all of the individuals that, you know, we need you to be telling us what is going on outside. We have a good idea what's going on inside, but you have to help us. And then what we also implemented and have maintained is face masks are a requirement on our site. So a team member coming in every morning, we'll provide them a face mask. They can certainly wear their own within the guidelines that we've outlined. But once you enter the gates of our facility, that face mask is to remain on properly, except at the times when you're drinking or you have or eating. So it's been a change. There certainly are comments back and forth as people are physically moving. It takes some getting used to, as we all have experienced. Breathing through a mask can not be so easy, especially for some individuals, but it's become pretty commonplace now and everybody is beginning to accept it, although I will say that they would like to stop it. We also talk a lot about what I show on this slide is 6-10-10, still following the guidelines, practicing 6 feet apart, promoting that no more than 10 people in a gathering and that we don't congregate together for any more than 10 minutes at a time. And I'll come a little bit to that in another topic in a minute to help explain why. There's numerous advertisements and signs posted about continuing to wash your hands on a basis. There's a large number of alcohol-based sanitizers scattered throughout the facility. And then, of course, what is a big change, I think, for all of us as a cultural change is just the handshaking and the greetings that we've all had to go through. And you still see people wanting to reach out and shake your hand or give a fist bump or, you know, in some way. That is a really big change, and it's a difficult one to break. Things that we've done to try to help promote good behaviors and promote information that we need the team members to know as it relates to COVID-19. We have had a mobile app that's available for our team members, so we've used that platform to create communication channels both internally and externally to them. It could be about work schedules, but it can also be about just general COVID-related information that they may already know, but they also hear it from us. We utilize toolboxes, which is just another communication method where the initial first-line supervisors will provide information about what we're going to do, and then we've had a series of different videos with executives within the company, but also within some team members, again, trying to just make connections about what is in fact going on. We created one thing that's really been, I think, successful is a virtual roundtable. So our typical practice has been that we always have had a number of team members selected on a monthly basis to come and have lunch with different executives. We listen to their voice, they get to ask questions. But certainly in the time of COVID, we can't exactly do that. So we created a virtual roundtable method through our app where team members can submit questions, much like we're doing on this video chat right now. And we can respond back to their questions within 24 to 48 hours, trying to give them information. And it's a wide variety of questions that do come out of it, but I think, again, very successful. So the general PPE guidelines I've outlined, those still remain in effect. We do a lot of cleaning within the factory at each rotation and between shifts, again, promoting a safe working environment. That it can extend to anything that we use to get from one shop to the next, including bicycles, scooters, and radios. Then we've also limited the use of vehicles on site just to promote, again, a more healthy environment. From a startup meetings, this was a big change. Normally in the morning or the start of a shift, the first line supervisor has a meeting with all of their team members. Well, we couldn't do that because some of these groups were anywhere from 30 to 40 people and they would be in close proximity to one another. So we had to break those into much smaller meetings which means you have to then communicate with a team leader who is kind of like a coach or a trainer of other team members and let them be the messenger for that particular day. And they do those in groups where you only have upwards of 6 people. Those had to be planned throughout the facility because, again, you're trying to promote social distancing. So we created areas where we put markings on the floor just to show people, here's where your normal area is, here's where you need to stand. We also pushed heavily that team members who like to arrive early for work, which we love because we can know they're going to be here, but now we don't need them to arrive in 30 minutes before shift. And that's primarily to prevent the overlap of the 2 shifts and people sitting in teams that are creating other potential social distancing area problems. Then, of course, during lunches and breaks, we've had to set up additional spaces for spreading the workforce out. That meant relocating some logistical materials and creating new inventory routes that had to be considered that previously had never been needed. As I said, from a communications point, we've tried through our app to keep a positive message, but also trying to communicate what is going on related to our own work environment and the COVID situation. We get a lot of questions about individuals having tested positive. Of course, following the HIPAA practices, you can't share that, but we try to give statistics of what we've seen inside the plant, again, trying to promote that, you know, we are upfront with what is going on and we're maintaining that data so that we can address it appropriately and if need, make additional changes. With our headquarters being in Seoul, South Korea, that certainly there's a lot of questions that come from that side of the world. We've had to take into consideration those items also. As there are some similar, but yet also some different practices from one country to the next. One of the things that we did during the shutdown period, and then we have continued as we've gotten back up, like many other companies, we came up with an idea and working through with some colleagues at the Economic Development and the Georgia Tech on a CSR campaign and making a face shields for the medical industry and the emergency response people. So that's been a good extension of what we do. We took our practices of that we knew how to put things together in an efficient way, and we've now applied them into a face shield production operation. This slide just shows you some of the markings and things that we've had to consider throughout the facility. Initially, it looked a little bit odd, but now it's become just normal business for us. And we continue to enhance those as we get more and more information from the CDC or other agencies. Again, just other markings of how do you have to break up groups of 30 to 40 people, and these habits that we have as human beings, we've got to try to break those habits. So we've gone as far as putting X marks the spot where you sit for your lunch in your particular area, and an additional signage that is, again, as I said, all throughout the facility. Another sign covering all of the different individuals in multiple languages that we experience within the facility. But I think to wrap it up, there's still a lot of challenges for us as a post-pandemic. Team members having been off the entire month of April and then only working 1 out of every 3 weeks in the month of May, you start to recognize that individuals who have been doing this business for 10 years, the work conditioning and hardening becomes a new venture for you. It's not that you forget how to do it, but it's the muscle memory. And when you go back to 3 shifts that we've done, what we have seen is it's taken us a while to get people back into that general work conditioning program. They've certainly had to learn new aspects of their job because those particular parts that they previously were putting on have moved to somewhere else. We've had different volume changes or schedule changes simply due to the market environment, and initially thinking that it was not going to be as aggressive as what we had planned. We've then had to shift gears and go back to a more aggressive plan. But one of the things that we have clearly seen as a problem is our absenteeism. And there's a lot of things around that. There's certainly a fear amongst individuals about what is going on with COVID. They have not only themselves to be concerned with, but their families. And that's been difficult to manage. We also have all the CARES Act that has been in place. That's maybe arguably created some unintended consequences, and those still remain as challenges. But as big as we are, those challenges are there. But when you start extending into the supply base, those particular issues are tenfold at best. We initially had concerns with our supplier operations coming out of Mexico, where we had issues in the States. They were behind us in how that they were going to move forward and open up and operate. But now what we're seeing is some of those issues that we thought would occur in our Mexican operations have now occurred in the US operations, specifically with absenteeism. One of the things digitally I would think has been beneficial to us is how we communicate with the suppliers. We need to know what their production numbers are. We need to know their attendance numbers, because with that data, we can then predict what we're going to be able to do, which drives our daily schedule. It certainly helps to communicate to our own individual employees. So it does require us to manage not only those communications externally, but it does require us to manage those communications internally. We are doing testing on site, and certainly we can do it off site. We started off with a test that we could get back in about 24 to 48 hours. As more testing is being done now, it's going in the 48 to 72 hour range. And recently we have implemented rapid testing, which also gives us some comfort level. I spoke to the market trends. We fortunately, as a company with some new products out there, still have an optimistic view. We would like for it to be more optimistic, but considering the circumstances that we're in, we think that we're in good shape. Flexibility has been an issue. We have always been a very flexible plant, but that flexibility has come in when you have to deal with not only the attendance, but the schedule changes on a daily basis. We continue to work heavily on the floor. There's a heavy management presence on the floor because we have had to become part of that communication tool. You can't always rely on toolboxes and other messages. Team members have concerns, and that is how we promote within our culture that one-on-one communication. I think the three things on the bottom and the future challenges and risks are in front of us, and we hear them on the news. It is going to be very interesting to see how we're going to get schools started back. And without schools starting back, that's going to bring another problem, which is potential additional absenteeism. Also, with the COVID rates rising in specific areas, that certainly has an impact, and it certainly drives the fears. And then as we're all anxiously, I think, awaiting to see what is the next stimulus bill and what comes out of that, that will drive what our next set of measures that we have to be flexible in on a daily basis. That's quick, but it has been a challenging road. We've not had as many. I heard earlier someone was talking about cobots. You know, we're still a heavily human based factory, especially in our general assembly shop, but it does make us start to think, where are our next opportunities that we need to take a look at having a cobot or some other type of device. We will never get away from the human being. It is required to build a car, but we have to think going forward how we're going to improve this and reduce any other potential risks that may be out there. Questions?
Thank you, Stuart. I have a question to you. In terms of your plants in Georgia, as well as in other countries like South Korea, what kind of, what percentage of labor power is here versus what kind of automation they have in South Korean plants in terms of automation?
From an automation point, the body suppliers, just like our welding shop, are the primary automation. So in our welding shop, we have more than 300 robots, but yet it has one of the lowest headcount populations within our factory. And you would find the same at any of the supply base that are supplying, various structural components. You do have other suppliers that certainly have large tonnage presses for plastics, other various products in the car. That does exist, but you still have a lot of hand assembly, as there are a lot of small parts. It's just the large stampings and injection molding that does exist. Georgia, there's quite a bit of that type work that supports us even within the Troup County area. And then you can extend into the Alabama range, which goes to towards our sister plant down in Montgomery, also has quite a bit of that type technology.
Thanks, Stuart. I appreciate it. Jim, do we have any question for Stuart so far?
I don't see any in the Q&A. Not yet. We'll save them to the end.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Stuart.
Yep.
With this, I move to our second panelist of the day, Mr. Dave Ahuja. Dave is a Senior Vice President and CFO of Novelis Inc. Novelis Inc. is based in Atlanta in Buckhead area, and they are an industrial aluminum company, and they are in beverage cans, automotive, consumer electronics, foils, and packaging materials, etc. Dave, in his current role, oversees all the aspects of company's financial planning, analysis, global tax compliance, investor relations, and financial excellence. He has currently been overseeing debt refinancing to the tune of about $6 billion, as well as has been involved heavily in the acquisition of LRS. They made an acquisition of $2.6 billion pretty recently. So Dave, I will start. First question, is the acquisition now complete?
That is correct, Ani. The acquisition is complete now, and we are in the integration mode as we speak.
So, please start your presentation, and we'll have a question on later on.
Perfect. So I will share my screen in a minute, and just tell me if you can see the screen. Are you able to see my screen?
No, sorry, we are not.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So thanks, Ani, first of all, for your kind introduction. And it's a delight to be on this panel. So Ani already gave a couple of remarks on who we are as Novelis. I will just spend a couple of minutes on us, what we do, what are we, before I move to the core subject on what are we doing on the digital space. So first, we are a subsidiary of Hindalco Industries, which is the metals flagship of the Aditya Birla Group. Aditya Birla Group is a 40 billion revenue and market cap conglomerate based out of India, and is into a lot of diverse segments, which includes metal, telecom, and viscose staple fiber, and into a lot of consumer spaces and insurance as well. We are the largest aluminum rolled products supplier and recycler in the world. We are very proud about how much we contribute to sustainability in our role as the largest recycler of aluminum. Our revenues for our fiscal year 20 were 11 billion, and we generated a free cash flow before capital expenditures of $1 billion. As Ani was alluding to earlier, we just completed in April a 2.8 billion acquisition of Aleris, who was one of our industry peers in the rolled product space. And with that, we have expanded our global footprint to 33 operations spanning 9 countries with about 15,000 employees globally. This acquisition has also given us access into the aerospace industry, besides expanding our footprint in Asia and in Europe, besides adding building and construction in a very significant way to our North American business portfolio. And as we speak, we have about $700 million plus of organic growth and expansion projects to meet the growing demand of our customers. So moving on to the next slide. This gives a view of our customer portfolio, and as you will see, our customers are some of the most recognized names across the world in the beverage can space, in automotives, in aerospace, and in what we call specialties, which is a mixed bag of electronics and a number of other areas like heat exchangers, building and construction, foils, etc. So this is just a view of who are the customers with whom we deal. In fact, we are a supplier to almost all the automotive OEMs everywhere in the world in one or another way. So what sets us apart? What distinguishes us? Number one, our global presence. Number two, our emphasis on quality, service, and innovation. We are an industry leader in that. Recycling and sustainability. We have made in the last couple of years investments of about 600 plus million, close to 700 million in recycling, and there is more coming. We are focused very strongly on our culture and purpose, and make that the basis of all our strategic decisions. And then we have what we call Focused 5, which is basically on operational excellence. We focus on all aspects of operational excellence, starting from safety, customer centricity, quality, productivity, and return to our investors. On the right-hand side of the graph, of the chart, what you see is some trends about our performance. So you will see that we have been growing very well. On shipments, we are now at levels of 3.3 million tons from being a little over 3 a couple of years ago in fiscal year 16 and 17. Our annual adjusted EBITDA has been growing at a compounded annual growth of 11%. So you can see that our earnings have grown far ahead of our shipments, and that is because of the high focus on operational excellence, besides a lot of positive portfolio additions and expansions that we have made, particularly in the automotive space. So there has been a lot of focus on driving value added, value creating portfolio in the last few years, which has helped us to grow our earnings and profitability much ahead of our shipments. So now what I will talk about is really the core subject, which is how we have been progressing, what are we doing in the digital space. So to get us started, our thinking on digital transformation started before COVID. COVID has brought a lot of focus on digitization and automation, but as industry leaders, we started thinking about forefronting this in 2018. That is when we started conceptualizing about what we want to do. We thought that in order to maintain our leadership, it is not an option for us to invest in digitalizing our operations. And we thought that the whole focus of our digital journey should be actually in our operations. That is where all the money is. So we have been doing a number of things on the back office space, like in finance, as an example, but really we wanted to bring a lot of focus on the shop floor, on operations, just given the fact that that is what will give us the return on investment, number one. Number two, and even more important, is it will impact our customers in a positive way. So we really got onto the journey in 2019. And that was the first phase, which was a little bit of inward-looking phase, which meant the focus was on operations, on driving operational excellence with our focused 5, which I was alluding to earlier, which we used to measure our operational excellence performance. And we brought in digital technologies to basically solve problems which conventionally have not given us too much success. So basically try to do some problem solving on problems which have been vexing us and have not really been open to solutions because of lack of capabilities and technology. And the focus was on really big data analytics, advanced analytics, and we basically started with identified pilots so that we start in a contained way, help our people and ourselves to get the experience before we expand. Year 2, which is the year we are in now, is really taking it to the next step. So we are in that phase of taking us to the next higher level, which is getting into more customer and supplier facing actions. And really going to the next level of problem solving, which is more on the innovative side in really transforming both the internal experience on the shop floor and in operations, and also the experience that we give to our customers. So we started becoming more outward facing in this year. And really, it was all focused upon driving our key strategic value drivers, which would give us the maximum impact for us as well as for our customers. And then expanding what we had done by way of pilots. So really, all successful pilots are now being expanded to the remaining plans, so that we transpose the learnings that we have got at the pilot phase on a much expanded level. And the journey ahead is going to be even more transformative starting from next year, which means really look at transformative business models, bring in the next level of digital data and services, and really, use digital technologies to really transform us in a way that that our customers notice, and we see much larger benefits both on operations as well as with our people. So this has really been the journey so far and ahead. So what were the program objectives, getting a little more into what we did in our digital journey? We identified projects which targeted about 30 to 35 million of annualized run rate impact to be realized within 24 months. So this is a run rate annualized. That's what I'm talking about. And then it was about making sure that we create a common data dictionary across plans. We brought in computing technologies, including MS Azure, really leveraged cloud infrastructure through MS Azure as an example. We standardized on Python as our platform for machine learning for big data analytics. The most important thing was bringing in capabilities, and we established a center of excellence, which would basically help build capabilities across our global infrastructure, across all our plants and people in every part of the world. And towards that, we trained 100+ people in order to become more digital literate and set up a training academy in order to make this happen. And then a lot of it was about change management. It was about making sure that we have early adopters helping us to cascade the message across to have a wider embracing of digital technologies. So the pilots and the early starts were basically a vehicle to then spread the message, the training, and the learning to a far wider number of people and associates across the world. So this is really how we built our capabilities, and you will see from the bottom, starting from the bottom, we had to train people on the shop floor, and really it was about having digital literacy across the world, and that was done by translators. So citizen data scientists basically help make that happen. So it started with training a few, and then training the masses, so to say, and that was helped by data engineers who basically have the skills to be able to set all the platforms for advanced analytics. And above them were really the data scientists who had the academic training, the knowledge, and the capabilities to be able to really build all the platforms and build all the algorithms and look at problems from the point of view of digital sciences. So really, it was not a center-led thing, or rather, it was basically center-led to the extent of embedding capabilities. But in terms of resources, the investment of resources was really in training our people on the shop floor and in operations, and really transmitting digital literacy down to the shop floor. That was really the focus. So it was not investing in a lot of people in the center, but more about a model which created digital literacy in the operations. And that was really the whole thinking. And we had a number of use cases. So we started with 5 core Novelis sites for our pilots. We started with 25 use cases, which have been completed. And the whole focus was on improving throughput, transforming throughput, improving quality, and really improving recovery. And those are really the 3 big levers that would transform into a better customer experience, but also return on investment in terms of driving EBITDA and margins. And really, the impact that we had was pretty dramatic. The program exceeded all planned objectives after 18 months. We achieved run rate savings of 42 million. So versus a goal of 30 to 35, we achieved 42. So essentially, we exceeded what we had set out to achieve. And that really is a great motivation for us to take our journey to the next step. So one of the examples of the use cases that we implemented is in our plant in Switzerland, in Sierre, in the Valais canton in Switzerland. And this was about increasing our remelt productivity. So in our space, one of the big costs is really manufacturing the sheet ingots, which are then rolled and sold to our customers. And the remelt operation is one of the most expensive operations. It is very energy intensive and has a huge impact on the quality, because if you do not get the quality right at that stage, it involves a lot of wasted and depleted costs. So remelt and ingot casting is one of the prime areas from the point of view of focus on quality and productivity. And essentially, what we achieved through this use case is a 20% increase in throughput. And this was really about using big data analytics. So basically, there were about 150 variables that were investigated. We used 30 million data points, and really we identified all the improvements in the various levers. And by levers, I mean, optimizing the firing rate, predicting the total gas consumption, optimizing loading sequence, minimizing standby duration, minimizing holding duration. So by looking at many millions, tens of millions of data points, we basically came to what is optimal in terms of giving us the best productivity and quality. And that is how we were able to achieve this 20% increase in output from about 8 casts per day to about 10 casts per day. So that's almost like a 25% improvement, which added to our casting capacity. So this is just one example of the use case that we implemented and gave us huge success. So really, there were many such cases. There are many more in the pipeline, which will help us to continue through this digital journey. So what is the learning we got out of this? And here are some key learnings for the benefit of all of you. So one is the focus on implementation and really good planning, focusing on really the right resourcing across all the value chain in operations and IT and supply chain. That was one of the primary success factors. Then second, really being comfortable with a minimum viable product solution and plan to invest time and resources to scale up later. So start in a way that is digestible and don't try to load the system too much. Do it in bite-sized phases rather than trying to go big bang. Don't underestimate change management efforts. It requires a huge amount of change management. In 2018, the digital literacy levels were almost close to nothing, and the word digital was a scary word for most people who really thought that it is something that was beyond and above them. And so to really bring in digital literacy and comfort with using digital technologies was a big part of the change management, and we can never underestimate the amount of effort and resources that need to be put into that. And then stay focused on core objectives, but be flexible to adjust. So as you learn, you need to keep adjusting along the way. Don't move on until the time you have finished what you first set out to do. So complete what you set out to do before you get on to bigger and higher goals. And that really makes it more digestible and doable for the organization. So these were some of the learnings that came along the way and helped us to go through this journey with success. So that's really what it is from my prepared slides, and I'm happy to take any questions now.
Thank you, Dave. I have a couple of quick questions, and I'm going to read both the questions to you and you can respond. First one is Novelis has been active in acquisition last couple of years and before. And what impact do you think COVID-19 will have on your global M&A activity in your company as well as in your industry? That's the first one. And second one, how is your digital transformation project organized and deployed given the geographic diversity of your operations in so many countries?
Mm-hmm.
And both are from audience, both these two.
Right. So the first is about M&A. So I think that one of the challenges that has come to us as a result of COVID is that we completed this acquisition in April, and after that we began integration. Now you can imagine that integrating 3,000 people across the world remotely is a huge challenge, because you need to build new relationships. You need to help all the people who have come from the legacy Alaris to integrate and understand us, our culture, our operations, and to be able to do this remotely in the middle of this pandemic has been a huge challenge. Having said that, we have to say that it has gone way better than we imagined. We have been able to really leverage remote technologies very effectively, I would say, in making the best of this situation. And having said that, it's not been easy. In general, I think that that COVID-19 is having a dramatic impact when it comes to the M&A landscape across the world, because as you can imagine, when traveling is difficult, you have a constraint on people being able to come on planned visits. Many crucial discussions have to be held, face to face, and you cannot substitute physical presence for crucial discussions, particularly when you make such large decisions, which M&A always means. You make large decisions, so it just makes it a lot more complicated when it comes to M&A, and so that's really the answer to the point about M&A. Now, how have we been able to implement all our digital technologies across the world, across our various plants? So the whole model has been to really take digital literacy to the shop floor by investing in the right people who basically bring in digital literacy and have the ability to transfer the knowledge. So our data scientists and data engineers were the core, and we gave in-plant face-to-face training. So we are very fortunate that we were able to do this in the year before this pandemic struck, because had it been this year, it would have been a very, very challenging thing to do. But without knowing what is coming, we were very fortunate that we were able to do all of this in 2019. And so the digital literacy has already been transferred to the shop floor, to our operations. So the point to your question is really that training people, change management are the two biggest elements to invest in for any kind of a successful digital journey.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. Enjoyed your remarks. Now with this, we move to our last speaker of this panel, Mr. Vincent Nobon. And Vincent has been with Peugeot PSA North America since 1990. And since 2016, Vincent has served as Vice President looking after North American strategy and corporate product planning, etc. He has worked and traveled extensively in countries like Russia, Scotland, Nigeria, England, and also in New Jersey. He's multilingual and speaks many languages, of course, apart from French and English. He speaks German, Swedish, and a bit of Russian. Vincent, is that right? Vincent?
I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I'm trying Can you hear me, guys?
Yes, we can. And we have your presentation also.
Excellent. I don't really see what's going on, but I'm sure we'll be fine. If you hear me well.
Before you start, I have a question for you, Vincent.
Sure.
Okay, I read a couple of weeks back that Fiat Chrysler and PSA Group have merged, and they have given a new name to company as Stellantis.
Yes, indeed, and I will have actually just one slide for that. So
wonderful.
Don't steal my show.
Okay, all right, go on.
All right, no, okay. So I've got 4 points for you guys today. As Stuart alluded to, I have some commercial and manufacturing data about the impact of the pandemic. Then what is happening on the consumer behaviors, and what is the industry doing to face those consumers, and what do we at PSA North America take as a view about all that, and to conclude, some manufacturing considerations. So my demonstration to you today would be more focused on commerce, which I'm more familiar with, but there will be still some manufacturing element at the end, obviously. And as you were alluding to, I didn't want to start that presentation without telling the audience a bit more about what PSA is initially, and what Stellantis is likely to become. So PSA is one of the major automotive manufacturers in Europe, alongside the likes of Volkswagen and everything. And PSA took over last year, or not last year, 2 years and a bit ago, the European operations of General Motors, taking Opel and Vauxhall, in addition to the historic brands of Peugeot, Citroën, and DS. And now we have embarked onto yet another bigger project, which is a merger with FCA, as you rightly said. And we announced just a few days ago the new name of that company, provided the company takes place. I mean, that we have filed with the other authorities, whether it is in Europe or in America, as you guys know. You don't merge two big companies like those two just like that without the scrutiny of the legislators and the authorities. So that is happening as we speak. We have already issued what the name is going to be, and that will allow us to provide under that umbrella like 14 different brands, from Ram to Chrysler to Dodge to Peugeot, as I said, and Maserati and so on, making us probably the OEM that's got the biggest portfolio of brands, and making us as big as Toyota and General Motors, or at least, I mean, bigger than General Motors and not too far away from the Toyota, Volkswagen, and Nissan of this world. So putting us in a much better position for the future. And that is key. And that's good in transition for the rest, because that was today, FCA and PSA are actually very, very solid automotive groups. Our cash flow recently have been extremely strong. Our operational margins have been extremely strong. A COVID-19 situation was not expected, and you have to be super, super strong no matter what. And when you see on that graph is reporting here on a week by week basis, the decrease of the sales rate, the weekly sales rate, as opposed to what was expected during that period of time. So that captures that from the first few weeks of March till the end of June. And you can see on that graph that very rapidly the market plummeted over the 3 weeks early March down to minus 80%, and then recovered progressively and fairly rapidly, probably quicker than what we were expecting, a bit like what Stuart was saying, then plateaued and then back to some sort of a normal-ish level. But we still lost, during the period of time, we still lost, like in retail sales, more than 1.1 million units. So you can imagine the pressure it's putting on all the manufacturers. You can imagine a factory like Stuart suddenly completely at standstill, and whereas they're supposed to be producing all those vehicles. And then you can imagine the impact it does have on the inventory, whether it is at the manufacturing site or whether it is at the dealer site. And today, if you were to go out and shop for vehicles, you will hardly find the vehicle you want on the dealer lot. What is also interesting point of all sort of understanding of the situation for you, is to look at the way the different markets reacted to the pandemic and actually in terms of sales. So you can see sort of New York and San Francisco. New York is in dark, is in black actually here, black, and San Francisco is some sort of orange. And you can sort of see the lines going down to 0, and Detroit as well, because those states were locked down. You couldn't buy a car at the time, dealerships were closed and everything. Whereas you look at Tampa and Dallas, and especially Dallas in Texas, has been doing pretty well over the period of time, especially on the back of very highly subsidized pickup truck activity. And as you probably know, in Texas, you like your pickup trucks, and they're very, very attractive loans and loan rates, 84 months, 0%. So a lot of buyers actually went for those trucks. And actually the activity has been pretty good in Texas. So if you look at as a overall business, you see a shift of the industry towards more like the domestic, towards like the pickup truck, towards more like outright purchase or cash purchase, whereas premium has suffered a bit more, lease market has suffered a bit more, because especially the market that would take more premium vehicles have suffered, especially in New York and California and San Francisco. But overall, what is happening is that, as we see on the right-hand side of the chart, is that people in the main, 1 out of 3 said, okay, I'm out of the market just now. I am postponing my purchase, either because of the future looking a bit uncertain for them, or the shopping process not being that convenient. And that's my second point. Why was that process not so convenient, and what do we need to do? So interestingly, the pandemic hit an industry which is already under massive pressure to change. Plenty of data here that I will quote, I'm sorry for that, I mean, plenty of percentages here or there. But the first three, 64, 57, and 74, are about consumers in general. So 64% of the consumers say that the experience is more important than the price, actually, when they purchase. 57% would say that they would stop buying from a company because the experience was not good, or because the competitor was providing a better experience. And then 74% was actually or saying themselves, okay, I'm happy to change brand if the purchasing process is too bad. Then parallel to that, you've got consumers, and 36% of these consumers, when you look at the vehicle dealership, are saying themselves as satisfied, but that you could conversely say 64% are not necessarily very satisfied. And on the other side of the equation, how do the dealers look at that market? They realize that, yeah, we've got to change. And 89% do agree that they need to change. They need to find alternative ways to sell the vehicles to those consumers that are going to survive. But now, is it really happening? It is more or less happening. I won't read all those numbers just for the sake of time, but if you look at the bottom here, 39% and 56%. So those numbers here are about what was happening like sort of a year ago, 2019. 39% of the purchasers in the automotive industry were saying that they had a better experience this time around than the previous time. And you look at March, during the heat of the pandemic, as you saw earlier on, 56% actually said, yeah, I'm actually happier today than I was last time I bought a car. And very much because those dealers have embraced that digital retailing and have made that part of their relationship with consumers a touchless relationship, which is kind of interesting when you think about the whole thing and the way dealers are structured, and then they end up like having to completely review their process. Now, is it just like one-off, or is it like a long-term situation? I like to think that it is not a one-off. It's going to be a long-term situation, and that's why dealers have to be really sort of geared up for that. And we see on the right-hand side of the chart, 48% and 47% is the proportion of dealers that are sort of taking it seriously in different areas of how to prepare and how to continue that touchless experience. Now, if you look at 48 and 47%, again, conversely, that means that half of the other half is not taking that seriously enough, and I think that is completely wrong. So as far as we're concerned at PSA, and the way we're looking at introducing the Peugeot brand, and that's the Peugeot brand that we intend to bring to this market, and we're working on that. The Peugeot is not available yet, but coming up soon. It is very, very interesting that all this COVID-19 and this obligation for the consumers to consume actually the product via a touchless experience, via a digital experience, actually validated our assumption that we would have to go digital. If we want to be modern, if we want to be appropriate on this market and relevant on this market, we know that we need to bring something else than just beautiful cars. We need to bring a new consumer experience. And we know that those consumers that have experienced the touchless experience, whilst they were valuing that experience in the past, will just take the experience as for granted in the future. So you need to make sure that that is built into your model from day one. So we believe that our successful experience and automotive model, distribution model, will have to be built upon a 100% digital environment and that touchless environment. Now, we believe we have an edge. And the reason we have an edge is because you don't change a traditional dealer model from what it is to something completely adapted to the current situation. And we try to sort of identify that in that chart. So you see on the left-hand side, what is happening pre-COVID in terms of the overall relationship between the manufacturer, the dealer network, and the consumer. So the dealer network, as you have experienced that in your own life, buying a vehicle in this country, is the one you're interacting with. You don't interact with the manufacturer. I mean, you might receive some advertising and everything from the manufacturer, but you don't actually interact with the manufacturer. So your relationship is actually between the customer and the dealer network. And that has been up until now and recently a very much physical relationship. Now, post-COVID or with the COVID, we see that there's more and more digital retail opportunities coming up from those dealers. But has it changed fundamentally anything? No. You've just added an extra layer to something which was already expensive as a distribution model. I mean, all these brick and mortar that you see on the car districts and everything, these are massive. And so you're adding actually an extra layer, which is costly. I mean, developing a digital experience and a good digital experience does cost money. So in other words, we still have some years to go before we have an economic environment which has taken the reality of that digital environment that we're moving into, shifting into, and that the consumers are shifting into. And for quite some time, it's going to be pretty painful for the dealer network, we believe, to accompany that transformation. And the companies that have no legacy have succeeded so far, and only those companies. You would think about the Teslas of this world, or you might know Carvana, which is a used vehicle company, but still very much so digital based. Now, to sort of conclude my presentation and to open up on the manufacturing side and go back maybe to the core of your topic today, I try to list here all the areas where there's going to be challenges ahead in the manufacturing world. We already had, and that's what we see in gray, we already had some massive challenges, whether in US, in Europe, or in China, wherever. All our manufacturing challenges were geared up around the energy transition that we are seeing today. So as you know, that we're coming from this ICE technology, the internal combustion engine technology, to the hybrid, and then to the BEV, so battery operated electric vehicles. So that drives then first question: do we move straight away into a dedicated platform, which is a BEV platform that allows you to have a completely optimized vehicle that takes into consideration the battery position, blah, blah, blah. But then you need like a dedicated site for that, or a dedicated line for that. Or do you keep a multi-energy platform, which is probably less optimized on a product point of view, but which allows you then to have a more versatile industrial footprint. And then therefore on the same line, you might be able to have an ICE, an HEV, or a BEV vehicle going through. So this is already the existing environment we were in, which was challenging enough for us to go after. And that was already an implication about the supply chain. As you can imagine, the supply chain of specific EV component is not exactly the same supply chain as the ICE. So there was already issues to be had. Now, COVID-19 added, and that's what I colored here in a sort of orangish, salmonish, whatever that color is, on the left-hand side, is that now the COVID is actually putting another pressure on us in terms of, okay, what is that supply chain? Where are our suppliers, and how close those suppliers should be? I don't know about Stuart, but I'd like to think that because of the shutdown in Michigan, he may have wanted to open earlier than Michigan, but probably because he had some components coming from Michigan, he couldn't reopen his factory, although the factory is based down here in Georgia. So, and there's no way he would have thought about that. So even that the supply location today to forecast where the good supply location is, in the case of a future pandemic of COVID-23 or COVID-35, God forbid, is difficult, but then it's probably about contingencies. Most of the times we tend to have like one single source of supply. So clearly we will open up in multiple sources of supply just to make sure that we have that flexibility of drawing one or the other. But you can imagine that there's a cost implication, there's an R&D implication, there's a CapEx implication when you do that. Then the employee organization, the workers' protection, we saw that again in presentation by Stuart, and all that has been sort of implemented. Workstations have been spaced out. So all that is less efficiencies in the plant. Instead of 3 shifts, you tend to have either just 1 shift or 2 shifts at maximum. So all that driving the cadence down and the output of the manufacturing, actually the efficiency of the manufacturing that's down. So the increase of the actual cost of vehicles. So we already had that energy transition to cater for, which is already an issue to pass the cost of all that to the consumers. And now on top of that, we have the COVID. So I'm sorry, I'm giving a bit of a grim outlook of the situation, but that is a massive, massive challenge for all the OEMs. And you can imagine that how important that has become now. And to answer a bit your initial question, that merger with FCA will give the two groups far more resources to cater for that. And then finally, on the left-hand side here, I mean, if you happen to have the presentation, you'll be able to click on that, and there's a couple of more resources that are available from the Group PSA website about the some little movies about the future plant and other sort of things. All those movies, interestingly, were designed and filmed before the COVID. So I'd like to think that if we were to do those movies again today, we would probably change a few things, and I'm pretty sure that that will happen soon. So on that good note, I'll thank you everybody for the opportunity, and happy to answer any question.
Thank you, Vincent. That was very interesting and exciting. So I have a question to you and probably to Stuart also, because you both are in similar automobile industry. We've been reading a lot that COVID has impacted tremendously the airline industry. And by an extension, the aircraft manufacturing is also going to be lowered in probably next 18 months to 2-year time frame. Do you think now with this, Google has yesterday announced that, till next summer, everybody's going to be working virtually from their homes. Do you think COVID is going to lead industry into that kind of future forward trend where people are going to be working more and more virtually from their homes? And what will be the impact on your industry, automobile industry, to that, especially in US?
Yeah, it is interesting. But now, at the same time, what we are seeing, especially in Europe, as a good trend, where in Europe people would tend to utilize public transport far more than in this country, for instance. And we see that a lot of people are actually now reconsidering the utilization of this public transport and shifting to personal and private transportation. So actually, interestingly, we're seeing a bit of a change in the consumption mode by and some reason for purchase of people that would normally be happy with the bus, the metro, or whatever is available to them, to actually make sure that they have a private transportation. So it would be interesting to look at that on the longer term, whether just like a one-off. But I do think that that this is a possibility. Now, the other side of it, as you're saying, and we PSA, interestingly, are the first one to have announced in France that the company would be working remote. Our headquarters is about to be shut down in September. We're not renewing our lease in that building, so there won't be any more physical headquarters located outside of Paris anymore. And coming from an automotive factory and actually saying, and Carl Tavares was saying that, is actually, I want less transportation. We're going to save CO2. We will be responsible for the planet and everything. So, which is kind of amazing coming from an automotive manufacturer to say all that. And yet that's what we believe firmly. So yes, there will be less miles being driven and everything. So probably less parts and service business, probably less wear and tear of vehicles. So yes, indeed, I think that we are, on the longer run, there is definitely a risk of seeing the part going down. But interestingly, at the same time, we were geared for that. The Ubers and the new mobility of this world were also saying that the utilization of the vehicle would be going down and might have put some pressure on that. And to be fair, we've not really seen that yet. So I think let's see it long term.
Sure.
Difficult
Stuart?
to say. I don't know whether Stuart's got a different view.
Yeah. Stuart, what is your view on this, sir?
Well, I do think one of the things that's going to be quite interesting is this supply chain. And Vincent kind of mentioned that with so many different strategies taken by states here in the US, and then when you're having to deal with Mexico and even the own states within Mexico, each had a different strategy. I think there is a possibility where you're going to see some supply bases become more local to your plant. That certainly can reduce the logistics chain. And the reason being is it gives us a lot more flexibility to control our own situation. Vincent's point was right on target. Dealing with Michigan was more than frustrating. And then I thought we got through that scenario. And then we went to Mexico and it was just the same scenario over and over. But it also pushes you into diversification amongst suppliers. So the industry kind of tends to go in ebbs and flows, that it goes like single source and then it wants to dual source for a while. I think that you're going to find where people are going to want to go back potentially to some dual sourcing on key components, so that again, you have some flexibility depending upon where they are and what their particular circumstances might be.
Right. Thank you. And this is to all of you. And I think Dave mentioned here about the training aspect of getting ready since 2019 to implement digitalization. And I've been doing my studies, and I find that after the budget aspect of it, after the cost aspect of it, the second biggest factor is training the staff, retooling, and how difficult it is going to be based on what you mentioned earlier, Stuart, that we don't have existing staff is not coming. It's in furlough. And on top of it, we have challenges of worldwide about 15 to 20% drop of sales. So there's a pressure of that. And now you have to train your staff to deal with COVID and then manufacturing situations. So how challenging is the training aspect of HR is going to be in the coming months for all manufacturers?
Well, I'll go first. I think it definitely is going to be a challenge, but I think it's not only COVID. I think what we've also seen is the generation that's coming in now has more that mindset for that fast-moving digitalization. I think that's going to get accelerated, in my opinion. But what we've seen is some people, even with this COVID situation, have just said, okay, I'm going to retire and I'm going to move out. They may have had a plan to work for another 5 years. So that's changing the workforce makeup of what we're working with now. Not a bad thing. It's just a very different thing than what we were timeline anticipating. So we'll see what happens.
Right. Thank you. Dave?
So I really think that the one reality about the future is the ability to react and respond quickly. I think that we have to be very humble about our ability to predict the future. You can work with a lot of hypotheses today, and how things are going to look is difficult to predict. On the specific point about training and the contradiction of managing the economic impact of COVID, but also keeping the workforce up to speed with all the right toolkit, the knowledge and the capabilities. I mean, it's an apparent contradiction, but in reality, it's not a contradiction, because if we do not prioritize resources on ensuring that we invest in capabilities, it can only make things worse. So if there are some things that you want to protect, among those, one of them is making sure that you keep resources aside for continuous learning, for development of skills and training. It is not going to make it any better if resources are not adequately invested in that direction. So that's really how I would think about it. So I think that the one thing that every organization has to be very sharp about is, what are we going to do and what are we not going to do? And having that clarity will help allocating resources much better. And amongst the things that we have to do is making sure that we don't hurt our future, even in the middle of all the economic challenges.
Right. Thank you, Dave. Vincent?
Yeah, and I wouldn't add too much to that. I mean, again, if I were to take just a slightly different angle in the manufacturing, it's sort of interesting the way all these sort of working from home mode will have to be managed. As managers, it changes completely the way you interact with the teams and the way teams interact with each other and everything. And it's okay now, because we're still operating and interacting with the same people we've known for years, so which is fine. But the day we bring in new people, the day we have a company that, yeah, I mean, naturally with more and more people coming in and the attrition rate and that sort of thing, I don't know how we keep that sort of a culture going on just through Zoom, okay? And it is not the same. And so I think it's, but anyway, we're old guys, so maybe we're not young enough to understand, okay, what is that new culture is going to be? And I'm sure it will happen. So is it a question of training? Surely, in terms of managers, where I think there's surely something to be thought about, the way you interact, the way you manage your team, and the way it will impact on the culture of the company. So that's where I think people are worried, and I think we are, as the HR department is looking into that, I think that we are underestimating the overall impact on people's life, on people's, not mental health, but actually belonging and sense of belonging to the company, and also things. So obviously not the same thing for the industrial. You need to be there, present, I suppose. But for the backup and the back office services, clearly something that to be thought.
Great. Well, I think we are there in terms of time. I really want to thank you, Stuart, Dave, and Vincent, for participating in this session. It was very interesting. I'm sorry we didn't have much time, but we wanted to make a quick change in terms of to our lives. And I want to thank all the speakers of our first session as well as second session, and our partners and advisors, Georgia Tech CIBER, UIBS, Georgia Department of Economic Development, Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, Next Generation Manufacturing, Connex, and from Connex we have Barry Schwartz. He couldn't be here today, or he may be in our audience, as well as our partner Regina Maddox from Next Generation Manufacturing, and of course you have heard John Woodward. We really thank you for supporting us and reaching out, and we hope to have your participation and support for our future events. With this, I would like to thank you all, and I would request Jim to close the session for today's program. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.